I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Dankert, would you do the roll call, please?
Mayor Steen.
Present.
Councilmember at Large Austin.
Present.
Councilmember Pashusta.
Present.
Fisher.
Present.
Baskin. Helly. Waller.
Present.
King.
Present.
We have a quorum, Your Honor.
Thank you. Number one is a motion for adoption of the agenda with addition. Need a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Need a motion for approving the minutes from June 17th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Recognition and awards. We are fortunate to have Elizabeth down here from the coalition, and she is going to give us a presentation, and we're very fortunate to have the coalition here. I think that our LGA is very, very much the results of the coalition's efforts to the legislature this year. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, and that's one of the things we'll be talking about. But thank you, Mayor. As he said, my name is Elizabeth Wafel, and I am one of the attorney lobbyists with Flaherty and Hood, and I work with the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. I want to start by saying thank you. Both thank you for allowing me to come here tonight, but also thank you for all of the hard work that Austin does. We'll be talking about this a little bit later, but as I was just explaining to the Mayor and Craig, every year we give awards away at our annual conference for people who've shown outstanding service to the coalition and the work we do. This year, for the first time ever, we're actually giving an award to a city. We decided that the efforts of Austin were just sort of as a whole, as a team, were so helpful to what we were doing that rather than just recognizing one or two individuals, we actually created a new category of awards for cities. So we really appreciate everything Austin does. One or two new faces in the audience, just so you know what the coalition is. We are a group of 97 cities across the state. We work on issues that particularly affect Greater Minnesota, including local government aid, economic development, annexation, transportation, and environmental regulation. I specialize on the environmental stuff. Just to give you, before we dive into this session, I want to give you a little bit of background in terms of where we were at when the session started. And you probably remember we had an election last fall, although it seems many months ago. And it kind of created a situation where we had, for the first time in many years, a DFL governor from Greater Minnesota. Then we had the DFL took over the House, but in a turn from what we've seen in the past, it was dominated not by rural or by the inner core, but dominated by the suburbs. And the Senate remained in GOP control. So we basically had the only divided only divided legislature in the country. So the other backdrop to that is that the public really was pushing this year for transparency, bipartisanship, and an end to the acrimony we'd seen the last couple of years. This was a budget year. Every 2 years, the state is required by the Constitution to put together its budget. If they don't, we have a shutdown. But what we saw was there were competing visions of how we should actually be dealing with the budget and taxes. I think everyone agreed that even though we had a budget surplus, it probably wasn't going to be there forever. In fact, we saw it sort of shrink in the forecast from $1.5 billion to $1 billion. The challenge was that we had two very different views of how we should approach that. The DFL believed that basically this sort of disappearing budget surplus was a revenue problem, and they proposed a variety of new automobile-related taxes and an extension of the provider tax. The GOP view from the Senate was that it was actually a spending problem, and so they proposed spending and tax cuts. As you might guess, that sort of tension between the two really affected the discourse and what happened. Now, the goals for this year were pretty straightforward. We wanted to restore LGA to the 2002 level. We were pushing for a big bonding bill with money for child care facilities, wastewater, and economic development. We wanted child care grants for training and business development and a comprehensive transportation package. We don't want much. But I think the big thing we really need to talk about first is the LGA. And, I think it is a pretty big achievement. We got LGA back to the 2002 level. For those of you who have been watching this for a number of years, LGA hit its high mark back in 2002 at $564 million. It was cut by $100 million the next year, and then just sort of, death by slow slices, in the coming years down to $425 by 2012. We have been, obviously pushing back against those cuts, but but more importantly, really relentlessly pursuing that sort of restoration of that decline, and we were able to achieve that in this year's tax bill. Going into the session, however, there was no guarantee of success. On the plus side, one of the things that we do every election season, well in advance of the election, is we really get to know the candidates. And so we really spent a lot of time reaching out to different gubernatorial candidates. And Governor Walz really took our message on LGA to heart. And he, once he understood it, really started championing it and became a goal for him in his new administration. The other benefit we had is that longtime tax chair Paul Marquardt was a big LGA champion. He used to be the mayor of Dilworth and understands what it means to cities. On the negative side, we had a Senate tax chair who just doesn't like LGA. And, originally he floated an idea that he was going to increase LGA, but only for cities under 5,000. Then in his bill, he didn't include any increases. The other challenge, and it was one we weren't, we don't see as often, but I think we will be seeing more frequently, is that some of the legislators wanted to seek other forms of property tax relief. They wanted to, for example, put more money into renter and homeowner property tax refunds. But we were able to overcome these obstacles with a lot of work, a lot of group work. We proposed a $30.5 million increase. A lot of media, statewide guest columns, press conferences with the media, really high member engagement through action alerts and legislative action days. And then our lobbyists were, very, very busy on this, meeting with legislators throughout the session on this. And as a result, we were able to restore LGA to $30 million, or get that last $30 million. This is what it looks like for Austin. The one thing I will mention is that the $30 million is $26 million goes into effect, well, basically with the new fiscal year starting today. The next $4 million comes in next year. But this kind of shows that as a result of the legislative work, Austin will be receiving an additional $300,000 in local government aid. So hopefully that will be helpful. But I think I again want to mention what an important role the city did play in making sure that happened. Looking forward, this is not a battle that ends. That LGA, is something we'll always be working on. It was increased to the 2002 level, but that did not include inflation. So that's going to be one of the next fronts. And as you know, economic downturns happen, and LGA is often a target for cuts. And so we are always prepared to play defense as well as offense. The rise of suburban legislators within sort of the power circle at the Capitol is going to make LGA a bit more of a challenge. And I guess the other thing I'd mention is that there's been talk about a formula update. We will be discussing that before and during the legislative session. Not a wholesale change, but looking at are there things that can be made better. But rest assured, we remain committed to preserving and strengthening LGA. Now, the next big issue is something we've just started working on over the last couple years, and I know that my understanding is it's a big issue for Austin. There's a child care crisis in the state, particularly hitting Greater Minnesota. And Greater Minnesota, that's not 35,000 statewide. That's 35,000 slots that we have a shortage of in Greater Minnesota. And the challenge with it is there's a number of challenges, but it does hamper economic growth. Employers make it hard to hire or retain workers, and families leave our communities. We came up with a framework in terms of some policies we thought would be addressing it. First, we proposed $3 million for the 6 initiative foundations who have a deep expertise in this, but not enough money to get everything done. They were going to provide training and business assistance, facilitate planning, engage the private sector, and recruit providers. We also proposed $10 million in the bonding bill for a new facilities grant program. We led, it was a coalition, but we led the advocacy effort there, building, coalition of business leaders and child care advocates. We even got the chamber on board. The statewide chamber don't always see eye to eye with us, but we worked with them on this activity. Extensive media coverage throughout the state, and we got quite a large number of media editorial endorsements from legislators. Multiple legislative hearings and grassroots organizing with lots of contacts with the governor and legislative leaders. I also want to point out that we partnered with the Greater Minnesota Economic Greater Minnesota Partnership, of which Austin's a member, and we really appreciate their efforts as well. It did pay off. We didn't get everything we wanted to, but we did get, made some significant advances with money for both the Initiative Foundations and for a DEED Child Care grant that at least 60% will go to Greater Minnesota. There was $10 million for the facility grants in the House bonding bill, but as you know, we didn't have a bonding bill this year. I have to say that's probably one of our biggest end of session disappointments. The House put together a bill, it was in that House bill. Senate never really was that excited about it, and even though the final proposed budget deal suggested there would be a bonding bill, it kind of fell by the wayside at the end of session. But we think we've laid the groundwork to start addressing this child care issue. It's sort of raised it in sort of terms of people's minds, and so we've really laid the groundwork for more in the future. Some other economic development wins: $1.8 million for the BDPI, money for broadband, money for the Job Training Incentive Program, and then the brand new Airport Infrastructure Grant Program with $750,000. The next big thing, and I spent quite a bit of time working with Craig on this issue, particularly at the beginning of the year, was clean water money. And I'm sure you all are well aware that the 2018 bonding bill contained $123 million for wastewater and water infrastructure. Unfortunately, $59 million of that was backed by these new environmental trust fund bonds. And very controversial, there was a lawsuit that basically stopped them in their tracks from being sold in October, halting multiple projects, including one of Austin's projects. Our basic we really tried not to take a position in this because we didn't want to get caught between the Republicans and the Democrats on this. Basically, we said you either need to resolve the lawsuit or you need to replace the bonds. Spent a lot of time. We actually got a lot of really good media attention. Had a big column in the Star Tribune that got replicated statewide. The governor was paying attention. Legislators were paying attention. Yet nothing happened until the session started. We did introduce a bill with your representative, Gene Poppy, as our chief author in the House for $128 million. That would do two things: cover those bonds that were held up, as well as trying to cover some of the additional 2019 needs. One of the reasons we try to push for that money every year is that, as you know, you're going to have some more projects coming up in the next couple of years. Is if we don't continually put money into this program, things get backed up, and we don't want that to happen. So, really a full court press on getting all of that money through. And in March, the governor and the legislature finally agreed to fix the problem from last year, which we were very grateful for, but of course we weren't going to leave it at that. So after thanking the legislators, we reminded them that they needed to give really needed the other $67 million. That proposal was included in the House bonding proposal, but again, as I mentioned, the House bonding bill failed. Then our final area we spent a lot of time on is transportation. And, we were really hoping that, going into the session, it really sounded like people really want to do something about transportation. And we were thinking, okay, this is perfect. We can get some of our goals done. Our comprehensive package that we were pushing for was $50 million for city streets, $25 million for cities under 5,000, $25 million for larger cities, and then also money for corridors of commerce, including the $25 million in cash. Unfortunately, the House and Senate, very, very different philosophies, and the House wanted to, do a comprehensive approach with an increase in gas tax, tab fees, that would establish permanent funding for small cities, include more than $50 million for larger cities like Austin, and then money for corridors of commerce. Senate took the opposite approach. No new investment. They actually wanted to cut $25 million from corridors of commerce, and they did pony up some money for small cities, but it was $250,000, and that equals about $350. I'm guessing, I think, a city could probably fill a pothole or something like that. So, wasn't a great proposal. Unfortunately, we thought there was the final deal really that lost that opportunity and the interest in getting something done. No comprehensive package. What really happened is the GOP drew the red line. They said, we're not going to do the tax and fee increases, and the House decided not to push the issue. They conceded in exchange for health care provider taxes. So we had a very bare bones transportation bill. I guess the silver lining was we were able to fend off the cuts to corridors of commerce, and even if it wasn't funded this year, we think it's really important and significant that the House did include that historic amount of money for city streets in their bill, and we are going to be pushing for that next year. So I guess I had Shane describe the session for me in one sentence, and he said it was, the session was defined by bold proposals and little willingness to compromise. So what did we learn? I think, LGA, the achievements that we've had on getting more water funding really show that success requires persistence, and that it's all of us working together and pushing at the legislature. A couple other things, insights we've gained into sort of the various new folks that we're having to deal with at the legislature. With the suburban-led House DFL, they are willing to invest money into critical programs. One of the challenges we're seeing is that they're a little less likely to support Greater Minnesota specific programs. On the flip side, the Senate doesn't want to, they're less interested in new spending, but they are more willing to recognize that Greater Minnesota does need specific solutions in some situations. So what we're beginning to realize is that one of the secrets here is that really trying to engage Governor Walz is crucial for our success in helping to bridge the gap between those two sort of worldviews, and we'll continue to do that in the upcoming sessions. Looking ahead to 2020, as I mentioned, we're going to potentially be discussing LGA formula changes. Probably the biggest thing is the bonding bill. Really major focus, again, trying to get money for childcare, PFA funding, and our other economic development initiatives. We would like a comprehensive transportation solution. It is still needed. We are not optimistic, however. I'm just going to, be real here. That our expectation is if there's more money for transportation, it's going to come through the bonding bill, and basically both sides are going to use transportation funding as an issue in the upcoming election. And next year is, as you know, an election year, and we will continue to do as we have in years past, educate the candidates and public on our issues, because we find when we get them early, recognizing what's important, that's when we can really make a difference at the Capitol. So our work begins now for a successful session. Upcoming events. We have our summer conference coming at the end of the month. There's registration still open. If any of you can join us, I know a couple of you are coming, but as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be recognizing the city at this conference at our awards ceremony. And that, like I said, the first ever award for a city, just for all of the work that you guys put into our efforts at Greater Minnesota. It really did make a difference, and so big thank you to all of you. We have our fall conference, which is a great event, one of our more popular ones up every year, and that's in Alexandria, and that gets ready for the session. And then our Legislative Action Day is March 11th. We just booked the room on that. That's also an extremely popular event. It's gotten so large we had to move it out of our offices over to the Best Western. So. Really want to, again, thank you for all that Austin does to really help us be successful at the legislature. I appreciate you allowing me to speak, and I just want to point out to you that if you have any questions, and I'm sorry I didn't have the packet to you in advance, we were just putting the finishing touches. You're our first city visit so far, so there is a listing of all of the environmental work on there, and I'm the one that handles all that. So if you have any questions about that or any of the other areas, do let us know.
Council, any questions? If not, well, thank you for coming down. We appreciate the work you do, and keep it up. We'll see you on the 24th and 25th. Talk to anybody else. I think you said you can still get in there, right? Yeah, there's still space available. I think there's some space in the hotel. We've got an overflow hotel, and always lots of room for the for more attendees. And I will be leading the bike ride Thursday morning around Lake Bemidji. That promises to be a lot of fun. Weather pending.
Weather pending. Yes, so it's 95 degrees when we did the bike ride here down in Austin a couple years back.
Yeah, it'll be fine, I'm sure. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I think you're going to be, how are you going to get home? It looks like you're going to hit some bad weather yet.
It's going to be fine.
Take a break. Stay overnight. There's lots of stuff to do in town here. Thank you, Elizabeth. Number 4, we need a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Number 5, under public hearing, motion reviewing tax abatement application for Randy and Didri Smith. Craig?
Mayor, we need to open the public hearing, and then we need a motion to continue to July 15th, 2019 at the same time. There's an issue with the title that we need to resolve, and this, by continuing the public hearing, allows us not to have the publication costs again, so we'd ask for a motion to continue.
Need a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Number 6 on the petitions and requests. Number 6 is a motion reviewing ordinance modifications for small vehicle passenger service. Dan?
Yes, this is what we reviewed at the last work session. This would be for drivers for transportation companies such as Uber and Lyft to be able to operate within the city. We had to modify some of our small vehicle passenger ordinance just to make those specifications just for the transportation companies. So we would request that the council support it. We've already got the applications ready, so this ordinance would be in effect after publication if council adopts it tonight.
Council, we have talked about this at the work session. Any input, anything, questions, anything? If not, we need a motion. What are we at, 6?
Move that the ordinance be prepared. Preparation of ordinance modifications.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And
Move for adoption and publication of the ordinance.
is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Danker?
Councilmember Pashusta.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Waller.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Councilmember at Large Austin.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 5-0, Your Honor.
Thank you. 7 is a motion approving Turtle Creek Trail environmental documents. Mr. Lang?
Yes, as we discussed at the last work session, as part of our DNR grant application, we have to meet certain requirements. There's a checklist involved with that. We have gone through that process, and we believe we have completed all the necessary documentation, and we request a motion from the council accepting the environmental documents and authorizing us to move forward with the project.
Council, anything? If not, we need a motion for 7.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 8 is resolution approving a settlement between Hamel Green Abrahamson Inc. Stephen?
Yes, this is just a settlement agreement in the amount of $15,000 with HGA regarding the cooling system over at Riverside Arena, and we'd recommend approval.
Any questions? If not, we need a resolution for 8.
So moved.
Is there a second? Mr. Danker?
Councilmember Pashusta.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Waller.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Councilmember at Large Austin.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5-0, Your Honor.
Thank you. 9 is a resolution approving a contract with Austin Public Schools for school resource officer. Chief?
We have provided 2 school resource officers, school liaison officers to the Austin Public Schools. We've done so for at least one for 20 years, the other for about a decade or more. This is just a continuation of a contract that we enter into on a year-to-year basis, and we would recommend approval of the contract.
Council, anything? If not, we need a resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Dankert?
Councilmember Pashusta.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Waller.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Councilmember at Large Austin.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5-0, Your Honor.
Just a question on that, Dave. Who are our officers now?
Jim Lunt is at the high school.
Long time, right?
And Officer Brian Blake is at Ellis Middle School, but they both also serve the various elementary schools around the city as well.
Well, that works out good, too, because in the summer they go on regular duties, and that's when we need the most manpower, right?
Officer Blake does return to regular duty. In the contract, the school does pay us 90% of one salary, because just with the changing school year and the demands the school has, Lunt spends a lot of his summers actually still working in the school, handling issues with summer school and some of their 45, 50. Mostly at the high school, correct, yes.
Thank you. Number 10 is a motion reviewing an event application from Austin Inaugural Ribfest, and
Yes, this is an event application kind of relating to the outside sales and community events that we've been talking about recently, so I wanted to bring this to your attention and not have it on the consent agenda. But Mr. Sorensen, who is in here in the public, or in the audience tonight, he is requesting to do an event on July 20th in the city parking lot, kind of behind the bakery. You can see that he has kind of set forth the his plan for it, when things would be closed, how he's going to fence off the area. This event would be completely fenced off with security. And he also has the signature of all of the adjacent downtown businesses that they would agree that they have no issue with fencing off and closing that parking lot during that time. So, like I said, just because we've talked about these events so much recently, I wanted to bring it to council's attention specifically if they had any questions.
Counselor, do you have any questions? Now we need a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That was tough, wasn't it, Kurt?
You're
Well, that's
welcome.
good, you're our audience tonight, just about half of it anyway. 12 is a resolution approving a master services agreement with Stantec. Stephen?
That's actually me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Holly.
Oh, did,
He said 12, but you know.
oh, yeah, you're right.
Which one am I
Well,
looking at?
yeah.
11.
11.
I'm sorry.
But you said, you're right, approving master services agreement with Stantec.
Yep, that's it.
So this came out of our small area plan that we've been working on and trying to find some funding for, in working with Stantec on that small area plan and discussions about possible funding sources. We talked about some of the difficult locations we have in that corridor and in other areas in Austin that have had some contamination, considered a brownfield site that would need some investigation and cleanup before they could be redeveloped. They came up with a plan for applying and implementing a EPA Brownfields Assessment Grant. The maximum amount available is $300,000, and that would be used over a 3-year period. But this is right now, this master services agreement is solely for the application part. They will apply for fiscal year 2020. If that's not successful, they will apply again in 2021, and that's at no cost to the city. If we are successful in getting the grant, then there would be a second agreement that would detail how they would be paid through the grant proceeds. So right now, we're just dealing with the agreement to do the application on our behalf.
Could you repeat that?
So we're recommending that you approve the master services agreement for application. And it looks like Craig has something to add.
Very good.
Yeah, just, Mayor, members, this is part of our council goals, and want to just compliment Holly for her efforts to be creative and look for outside grants that can help us accomplish what we're trying to do and keep costs down and bring partnerships to the table, so thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, we need a resolution for 11.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Dankert?
Councilmember Pashusta.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Waller.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Councilmember at Large Austin.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5-0, Your Honor.
12A is a resolution approving a plat for Northridge Second Edition, and 12B, how you?
That's Nature Ridge Second Edition.
Nature Ridge, I'm sorry.
So this is a second phase of the original Nature Ridge project. At the May 14th, 2019 meeting of the Austin Planning Commission, the commission reviewed the Nature Ridge Second Plat and Development Agreement related to this subdivision development. The area consists of 13 lots covering approximately 5 acres, and this is just west of the Hormel Nature Center. After review with 7 Planning Commission members present, they voted unanimously to approve the subdivision with conditions that the plat conform with our subdivision ordinance regarding 2 corner lots, which would be adding additional width to those lots, and then approving our pedestrian plan as proposed by the city engineer and shown in their construction plans. They continued this meeting and rescheduled it to tonight. The developers did to allow for them to make those changes. So they have made those changes and have conformed with the conditional approval recommendation by revising the plat and making sure it's compliant with the required pedestrian plan. So the requested action is the council to approve or deny the plat and development agreement for Nature Ridge Second. Actually, this is just the plat at this point.
Council, anything to add or questions? If not, we need a resolution for 12A, approving a plat for Nature Ridge Second
So
Edition.
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Dankert.
Councilmember Pashusta.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Waller.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Councilmember at Large Austin.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5-0, Your Honor.
Thank you. We need another resolution for 12B, approving a development agreement for Nature Ridge Second Edition.
So move the
Is there a
resolution. Second.
Mr. Dankert.
Councilmember Pashusta.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Waller.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Councilmember at Large Austin.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5-0, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just say something there about that item B. In this development agreement, this is an example of where we are requiring a developer to install all of the public infrastructure at their own cost as part of the project development. We worked with this developer for probably 6 months on different details of the project. We worked with them to narrow down the roadways to meet some of our complete streets designs. We've added sidewalk to the neighborhood. It'll include street lighting as part of the development. So really, 100% of the construction cost to bring it up to city standards. You know, we talk about that a lot with assessments and annexation areas. We just talked about that with 6th Street Northeast, I think it was this year. So I just wanted to make that point where here's a developer that we're working with them to pay for all those costs on their own, and we're trying to be consistent as we have new neighborhoods that come into town through annexation or whatever, trying to be consistent with these same policies no matter what the situation.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. 13 is a resolution declaring the property located at 1105 14th Avenue Northeast a hazardous structure. We need a resolution.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Dankert.
Councilmember Pashusta.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Waller.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Councilmember at Large Austin.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5-0, Your Honor.
Thank you. 14 is a motion granting the Planning and Zoning Department the power to contract for the removal of junk and/or illegally stored vehicles at 1920 Fifth Avenue Northwest at Chin property. Need a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 15, our addition is a resolution approving a contract with American Engineering and Testing for vibration monitoring on Turtle Creek Flood Control Project. Stephen, I think this is you.
Yeah, sorry I didn't have the backup information for you earlier, but this project, as you know, we're working on the Turtle Creek Flood Control Project, and in recent meetings, meeting with the contractor and our consultants, some concerns were brought up about the proximity of some of the homes in this area, concerns about vibrations from driving sheet piling or from just our regular compaction equipment in order to build this berm. So what we have done is we have gotten a price from American Engineering and Testing in the amount of $22,776 to do a couple different things to monitor vibration around these homes and make sure that it fits within allowable standards. They will also be monitoring any settlement that may occur by establishing control point elevations around these homes and make sure that there isn't any settlement that occurs. And as part of it, they will also do a condition survey of 10 of the homes, the 10 homes that we are the closest, working in relation the closest to. They'll go through the homes, document any existing cracks that may be there. Maybe it's cracks in the concrete driveway or the walls, any of those existing things, to document that so that if new cracks show up, we've got everything documented of what the original baseline of that home was. So we've done this before. On the North Main Flood Control Project, there were a couple historic properties along North Main Street, and we had to do a condition survey of those, make sure that they weren't impacted by the overall project. So we feel this is a good measure to protect both the property owners and also the city from any future issues, is to have everything documented ahead of time. So we would recommend approving this, this work with American Engineering and Testing.
Council, do you have any questions or comments on 15? If not, we need a resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Dankert.
Councilmember Pashusta.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Waller.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Councilmember at Large Austin.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5-0, Your Honor.
Thank you. Do we have any citizens that wish to address the council? We have 2 news people and 2 citizens. So if you want to address the council on anything, this is the time. If not, we don't have our honorary council member reports and recommendations. Paul?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Jeff?
I just want to mention that the Park and Rec Board normally meets on the first Wednesday of the month, but since it is July, since it is the 3rd of July, we decided to put it off for a week, so we will be meeting the 10th of July this month.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Nothing.
Steve?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Chase?
Nothing.
Craig?
Yes, the only thing I had, I did get a letter from the chamber in concerns with the Freedom Fest. I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit here. But they want to have a discussion on the 18th of July, with discussion on passing on Freedom Fest to another organization. I know that's a significant concern for us, but just did want to bring that to your attention.
Yeah. They're gonna, I don't know if we should do a meeting on the 18th, if anybody's concerned. This should, obviously, if they're looking for another organization, the city's always in everybody's crosshairs, so we'll have to pay close attention to this. Okay, other than that, we need a motion to adjourn till Monday, July 15th, 2019 at 5:30.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, guys. Yes, big meeting. Hey, where are we at?